I'm coming from the Gumerijan lands of the Larrakia in Darwin in Australia. My name's Kutay, and I work with Nic Bidwell, and we also work with Ben about learning, and we're looking at learning AI in our language. We've in Northern Australia, we've got 30% Aboriginal population, North and Torres Strait population, whereas the rest of Australia it's 3%. So we're working with a large number of people in remote communities who speak first language, their local language, and maybe second, third language in English. A common language is Creole, which is a mixture of English, their local language, and spoke Spanish or Portuguese. And as a result, First Nations are very disadvantaged in health, legal, education, and business, which of course the materials in Australian English. AI translations often can offer support to assist this transfer of knowledge, but they do provide significant ethical risks in doing this work. The AI models that we started with were text-to-speech and speech-to-text at Charles Darwin University using 19 minutes of audio text pairs. And this was to support people being taught, who are in service delivery, being taught their local languages so that they could speak better to their local people. These models were developed for one language based on the phonetic transcription of these languages because they weren't written until invasion. And so we found that they can support other languages of similar phonology. So we're now collaborating with different First Nations to develop tools that translate Aboriginal English, Australian English into Aboriginal English or Creole, and then into local language to avoid word borrowing. We're doing this step to the local form of English. And using this, we're going to support First Nations students in their learning on the learning management system, and remote managers will also help understanding government documents and the KPI they get to run their projects. So we're working co-designing with these models with speakers of the low resource languages to help them understand the technology, what it does, what it doesn't do. The models can help them tackle these barriers posed by all the English documentation and strengthen the First Nations languages through the value placed in them, in a sense that young people from the community start to see languages as much more important in the mainstream. However, as we've already had concerns expressed through cultural harm from the collection and use of language, it's sharing it. If we take language, we share the knowledge of that language, the knowledge of the country, and it can be inappropriate. There's limits on agency in how much these people can be involved in the model and the ownership of it. And will we be replacing the employment from the Aboriginal Interpreter Service? It's a major concern. So when we developed those speech models, we took the models back to those who gave us the data. And one of the teachers was concerned because when she typed in a text that was her own initiative, then she heard it expressed in the voice of her colleague that it wasn't what that colleague had said. So it was spooky for her and possibly culturally contentious. And also obviously the language speakers see these models taking over this work as interpreters and teachers, which we can show if they're absolutely not up to that standard. They'll never be able to speak in the right kinship terms, understand the listener. So we can allay some of those fears and double protections by workshopping with the communities to demonstrate these models, show the limitations in the translation. They're very general. They provide some idea to help the user understand, but they don't translate exactly, and make some informed decisions about what type of models they want to use in translation. And this may encourage them to contribute more voices and vocabulary to improve these models so they become more accurate and useful. So in our workshops, the First Nations participants explore the models we've already developed for standard English and plain English translations. And the developers and cultural translators explain the technology that we're using and step through. We can show it as it develops, show the RAG inputs, show the differences, and show the stages in development. And we can use real world examples and languages that participants can understand, so they see their own Creole being used. In the discussion, what we cover in workshops is threats and opportunities. Oh, is this yours, Nic? Sorry. No, sorry. Threats and opportunities for the technology. how each respective community might decide to use the model. The data sovereignty, because we are, as I mentioned in the chat, that we don't share our language on the web. You'll find very little already open on the web. And so there's with a lot of concern about the use of data. So that's why we're using a computer within this university. We're not sharing it openly. And the development step of using plain English before translating avoids that word borrowing. And we're looking at maybe model sharing between language groups, because there's a lot of commonality of words across the country, which might help, between lower resource languages helped by high resource languages. And we're looking for the constraints for any formal implementation agreement that they might set up for the work. And sorry, Nick, yours.
Right, I'm Nic Bidwell. I'd like to acknowledge the Larrakia people, the traditional owners of the land on which I speak today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening, and recognise their unceded sovereignty of the places in which I work and live. So research with First Nations people in Australia is guided by quite well-defined ethical guidelines. There's National Health and Medical Research Council guidelines and the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. So there's lots of quite well-defined codes of conduct. And as Ben mentioned in his talk, there's a bunch of classic methods like yarning, storytelling, cultural governance that we have at our disposal. However, with all of those codes and I think Ben's talk showed this a little bit too, it's not possible to anticipate all the harms or the risks that can emerge in this complex space of different knowledge systems, even if the researchers in the communities are already well informed. So what I bring to this piece as a new person on this particular project, somebody who comes from an HCI background working in the Global South, is that along with honouring these essential principles and culturally appropriate methods, we advocate for participatory ethos building. So this is an orientation, it's a personal commitment to exploring, reflecting and adapting together. So for Westerners or outsiders, or let's be honest, colonisers in this space, this requires investing time, listening carefully, self-critique and humbleness, and being constantly prepared to revise the goals, leave your goals, remove your expectations and actions, whether they are the big ones or whether they're the small everyday ones, the way you are, the languages you speak, and so on. Such critical reflexivity needs to be built into the culture of AI design and governance. It's about who we are. So thank you for that, and we'll take some questions at the end, I guess.